The International Rules of the Historical Medieval Battle. Chapter 1, General Regulations. 1.1 Historical Medieval Battles, HMB, are full contact sporting battles, where historical protective and offensive arms of the Middle Ages, specially made and adjusted to this kind of competition, are used. HMBs are held on the list of a standardized size and shape, with different types of authentic weapons depending on the kind of battle. 1.1.1 The concept of HMB includes all kinds of full contact power fight, namely historical fencing, buhurts, melee, duels, small group battles, mass field battles, professional fights, etc., where items of historical reenactment of the Middle Ages, HRMA, are used. 1.1.2 HMBs are always held in full contact, but are represented by different categories, with various authorized and prohibited techniques. In addition, victory conditions, battle regulations, tournament schemes, and other parameters are different. 1.2 All HMBs are held under the control and observation of a marshal's, referees group, including one knight marshal, main referee, field referees, linesmen, and referees on video monitoring. The number of members of the marshal's group is set separately for every event, depending on its format and content. The presence of the knight marshal and field referees is always obligatory. 1.2.1 The knight marshal is chosen by the organizers of the event. In any case of a disagreement, the knight marshal has the final decision authority. 1.2.2 The records of the combat process and combat results are made by the Secretariat. 1.3 To get admission to the HMB, a fighter has to 1.3.1 Be of age in terms of the law of his country, as well as the country hosting the event. 1.3.2 Sign a statement of voluntary participation in full contact battles. In the statement, a fighter confirms his acceptance of any risks associated with participation in the battles, declines any claims, and assures he is familiar with the rules and agrees to follow them strictly. 1.3.3 Have a health certificate issued by a specialized medical institution confirming that he has no contraindications to participation in the competitions. 1.3.4 Be accredited by the organizers of a specific event. 1.3.5 Have an admission for protective and offensive arms provided by the technical and historical committees. 1.4 Only those offensive and protective weapons which have analogues of a certain historical epoch confirmed by scientific research are allowed in the HMB. 1.5 A fighter needs to rebate his weapons before the participation in an event and bring them into conformity with the specifications stated in this regulatory document. Rebating is rounding of peak and percussion edges of any bladed or pole weapon used in the HMB competitions. The radius of rebating is about 10 millimeters. Note, it should match the radius of a coin, 20 millimeters in diameter. 1.5.1 The edges of all the striking parts of any weapon are to be rounded as a bevel and be not less than 2 millimeters wide, including any possible chips and notches. 1.5.2 The edges of shields are to be trimmed with thick, not less than 2 to 4 millimeters, leather or fabric put in 3 or more layers joined with glue. Important: all wooden, wicker, or leather shields should be made only on the basis of reliable historical analogues and correspond to the form of the analog in all 3 planes. A shield can only be used with a set of armor of the same epoch and region. 1.5.3 Edges of the iron shields have to be carefully forge-rolled and be a minimum of 4 millimeters thick. Important: steel shields of only rounded shapes, made on the basis of reliable historical analogues, corresponding to the form of the analog in all 3 planes, are allowed. A shield can only be used with a set of armor of the same epoch and region. The weight of any steel shield shall not exceed 5 kilograms. 1.6. All responsibility for the quality, safety, and reliability of the elements of protective arms is on a fighter who uses them. 1.7. Below you will find a list of permitted weapons as well as technical requirements for them. Important. The maximum weight of all weapons fully assembled and ready for battle is given. The permissible upward error is plus 100 for single-handed, plus 300 grams for two-handed models of arms. 1.7.1 Bladed weapons. Single-handed swords, sabers, broadswords, up to 1,600 grams. Falchions, up to 1,800 grams. Long swords, total length is up to 1,400 millimeters. Swords, sabers, broadswords, up to 2,500 grams. Two-handed bladed weapons of the 14th to 17th centuries, up to 3,500 grams. 1.7.2 Pole arms. Single-handed, axes, up to 1,300 grams. Maces and six-flanked maces, up to 1,000 grams. Important. The length of a cutting part of an axe blade is to be not less than 7 centimeters. Important. All the maces and six-flanked maces should have only wooden handles and no sharp edges. 1.5-handed axes, pole axes, and other similar weapons with a total length of not less than 1 meter, up to 2,300 grams. Two-handed halberds, glaives, pole axes, and similar kinds of weapon with a total length of more than 1,400 millimeters, up to 3,000 grams. Important. Heavier weapons, or only thrust weapons, are not admitted for use in historical medieval battles. 1.8. The approved protective arms for HMB competitions must be a restoration of medieval armor. The restoration must have the exact proportions and general appearance of historical analog, and correspond to such characteristics. Compliance with scientifically proved originals of the 13th to 17th centuries. Authenticity of used materials, steel, leather, fabric, cotton waste, batting, felt. Availability of configuration that completely covers the vital organs and joints of the fighter. Good condition. Thickness of protective material should meet the requirements stated below. Size and proportions of all the protective elements should meet the requirements. Aesthetic appearance. 1.9. All items of protective arms have to meet the technical and aesthetic requirements and represent a complete set of one time period. Important. Only in rare cases, due to a lack of information concerning the material culture of certain periods and regions, stylized armor elements are allowed. In this situation, a fighter can replace these elements with the authentic elements relating to the neighboring regions and periods, but only if everything looks aesthetically and proportionally. Concepts that require further interpretation and explanation. 1. Authentic. A material or object that corresponds to a certain historical origin found during the research. The use of authentic materials and items coming from the original is approved by the community of historical reenactors of the Middle Ages. 2. Stylized item is an object that has no specific historical analogs, but made in compliance with the general style of armor, its proportional, aesthetic, and operational characteristic. 3. Scientifically proved original is text and visual material, pictures, sculptures, and other documented archaeological sources or their combination, on the basis of which a belonging of a particular object to the group of authentic ones is determined. 1.9.1. The fighter's head is to be protected with a metal helmet, safety features, and specifications of which comply with the same parameters of a helmet made of plain steel 2 millimeters thick. 1.9.2. The fighter's helmet is to be equipped either with a well-quilted padded cap or leather suspension, a parachute with a quilted padded cap. The thickness of these elements is not less than 10 millimeters in a condensed form. 1.9.3. The fighter's helmet must have a genial strap, which does not allow it to fall down from the fighter's head. 1.9.4. The fighter's body, arms, and hands are to be covered with lamellar armor. The chainmail can be only used as an extra protection in addition to lamellal armor or the linking elements in lamellal armor. 1.9.5. In addition to armor, the fighter's body is to be protected with under armor padding, which covers the entire torso. A layer of linen and cloth sewn together is the minimum acceptable under armor protection. 1.9.6. The back of the neck and base of the skull have to be protected with steel lamellar armor element, supplemented with damping quilted or padded protection, such as a pelerine of the padded cap, a special collar, or a filling. A riveted chainmail element with the lamellar protection and a protective damping layer located under it is allowed. (1.9.7) The spine and tailbone should have steel lamellar protection with quilted or padded protection not less than 10 millimeters thick in a condensed form. 1.9.8. The fighter's hands are to be protected with gloves or mittens made of steel plates or riveted chainmail. If the hand's protection is made of riveted chainmail only, a damping layer not less than 5 millimeters thick in a condensed form has to be under it. 1.9.9. Hands and forearms of a fighter using a shield with the elbow grip can be protected with steel armor elements. Then, if a fighter loses the shield, he'll be able to continue the fight. They can be protected minimally, only with under armor padding and cloth gloves, but from all the sides, which may be under attack. The minimum level of under armor protection includes a layer of woolen and linen cloth sewn together. The fighter's elbows and knees must have a steel lamellar protection. If the lamellar protection doesn't fit the fighter's armor, it should be hidden under the authentic element of the set. The minimum level of under armor protection includes a quilted or padded protective layer not less than 10 millimeters thick in a condensed form. 1.9.11. The fighter's shins and thighs are to be protected with steel armor elements at every side. 1.9.12. The fighter's groin is to be protected with armor elements or hidden protection, an athletic supporter for contact sports. 1.9.13. The protective complex has to provide a complete and reliable protection to the head, neck, spine, and joints in any fighting position. 1.9.14. In the case of a fighter who represents a time period when certain parts of the body weren't covered with protective elements, these zones are to be safely covered with hidden protective elements, Eurasia region of the 13th to 17th centuries, which aren't registered visually. 1.9.15. If the level of safety of the authentic protective arms does not meet requirements of these regulations, a fighter should use extra protection made of any kind of authentic materials, worn only under authentic armor and under armor. Important. A modern protection, having its own fastener system, can be used only as the third protective level. 1.9.16. The fighter needs to be sure of his armor protective characteristics and check the accuracy and safety of any defensive parts before a battle. 1.9.17. The fighter is responsible for the offensive and protective arms he uses in battle and for monitoring their authenticity, aesthetics, and compliance with the requirements stated in this regulatory document. Important. The fighter uses in battles only those weapons that are authorized by the technical and historical committees. Chapter 2. General Rules of Battle Holding. 2.1. HMB competitions are held in different categories, each of them having approved battle regulations. Special editions of the common international rules adapted to certain categories are possible. 2.2. The conditions of victory can also be changed depending on the battle regulations of a certain category. 2.3. The main criterion of victory in team battles is a removal of an opponent or all members of the rival teams from the battle. In the category group battles, a fighter is removed from the battle when 2.3.1. He touches the surface of the lists with a third point of support, with torso, buttocks, arm, knee, shield, etc. The rule applies if a fighter falls with an opponent. Important: 2 basic supporting points are feet. 2.3.2. He leaves the territory of the lists with both legs or falls out of the lists. 2.3.3. Any element of his protective equipment compulsory for admission to the fighting in accordance with these rules is broken or lost. 2.3.4. He touches a lying fighter with his torso or bottom. Important: when a fighter falls on his opponent and touches with a third supporting point, except for body and bottom, only his opponent, who lies under him, the fighter is not considered to be fallen. 2.3.5. Continues to fight without a weapon in his hand. Important: in the case of a fighter who has lost his weapon, he has the right to use a spare weapon he has, to cease fighting sitting down on one knee, to take a spare set of weapons from the reserve fighter of his team standing at a special place near the fence of the lists. The fighter has a right to protect himself from opponents' attacks without making attacking or blocking actions. Important: it is strictly prohibited to take a weapon from the surface of the lists from fighters that aren't in battle, or take a weapon from someone other than a reserve fighter standing at a point of arms giving out. Important: the fighter with two-handed polearms must hold it firmly at least with one hand. If the weapon is suppressed between a fighter and his opponent, sets against the lists, or if it's held not by hand but by other parts of the body, the fighter is considered to be unarmed and naturally out of battle. 2.4. The main criterion for winning in the HMB duels is scored points. The points are awarded for successfully delivered blows, techniques, and other activities considered to be productive according to the rules of the category. Chapter 3. Authorized Techniques. A battle conducted on the lists is regulated by the list of the authorized HMB techniques, which includes 3.1. Any punches, strokes with a weapon's striking edge or shield on the opponent's kill zone. Important: the kill zone excludes the feet, back of the knees, groin, back of the neck, skull base, and open face. 3.2. Strokes on an opponent who has lost his balance until he falls on the ground. 3.3. Pushes or strokes with head, shoulder, elbows, knees, and body. 3.4. Holds of non-combat parts of the weapons or shields of the opponents with free hand. 3.5. Attack with free hand, strokes, holds, pressure on the allowed zones. Important. A fighter can strike with a free hand, but only in the case when he holds a weapon in the other hand. 3.6. Attack on the opponent who has lost his weapon. 3.7. Kicks to the kill zone. Important. Any actions, strokes, pressure, etc. with foot aimed at the knee joint on either side are prohibited. 3.8. Wrestling techniques, throws, back heels, etc. Important. Painful holds, suffocating techniques, windmills, arch throws, and fighting in the stalls are prohibited. 3.9. Holds of the body of the opponent with the weapons from the front, from behind, and from the sides. Important. Holds with direct pressure on the neck are prohibited. 3.10. Overlapping of a shield, blocking of the opponent's hands with a shield, and putting a shield's edge under an armed hand. 3.11. Blows with the ridge or body of a shield in kill zones. 4. Prohibited techniques. Any prohibited strokes or actions against an opponent are serious breaches of rules which lead to rebuke, warning, or disqualification. It doesn't matter whether a breach was made accidentally or on purpose. The sanctions are to be imposed anyway. Each fighter should avoid usage of the prohibited techniques, among which are 4.1. Any pricks with weapons. 4.2. Strokes with a weapon, shield, or arms in the non-kill zone. The non-kill zone includes the feet, back of the knee, groin, back of the neck and skull base, and open face. Important. Any strokes on the feet, back of the knee, groin, back of the neck and skull base, or open face are strongly prohibited. 4.3. Strokes with a weapon, shield, or arms under the knee. 4.4. Any vertical strokes with weapons or shield along the spine. 4.5. Twisting against the natural direction of a limb flexing and any painful holds. 4.6. Pressure or hooking the edge of a helmet with a hand, as well as actions aimed at twisting the neck by pressing on the edge of a helmet. 4.7. Deliberate attempts to remove any elements of the opponent's protective kit. 4.8. Punches with weapons hilts or fists aimed at the face of the opponent, if the gap between the hilt and fist in combat mitten or glove is more than 3 centimeters. 4.9. Any holds, hold downs, or suffocating techniques with hands or weapons around the neck. 4.10. Any strokes on a lying or standing on one knee fighter. 4.11. Any strokes to the neck or the head of an opponent who is bending 50 degrees or more. Important. When an opponent is bending 50 degrees or more, whatever the reason, it is allowed to strike, punch, push, or backheel him, but it is not permitted to strike him on the neck or the head. Important. .12. Deliberate injuring of an opponent after he loses a part of his equipment. 4.13. Any thoughtless or uncontrolled strokes or motions with a weapon. 4.14. Any attacking actions toward a fighter who has raised one hand with an open palm. Important. A raised hand with an open palm is a sign of voluntary leaving the battle. Having raised his hand with an open palm and kneeling on one knee if there is such opportunity, the fighter automatically takes the position out of the battle. .15. Inactive clinch that lasts more than 10 seconds. In this case, a field referee can pull the fighters who are in the clinch apart, giving a command break, and hanging a yellow referee flag attached to a baton between the opponent's helmets. After this, the fighters have to stop fighting in a clinch immediately and step aside 2 steps from each other. An additional command, to the battle, given by the referee who has stopped the clinch, serves as an additional signal that the battle is still in progress, both in general and particularly for the fighters who are in clinch. Important. The local commands break and to the battle are only for the fighters in clinch. After the command to the battle, a fighter can continue the battle against his opponent or attack another opponent. 4.16. Any attacking or blocking actions with no weapon in the hands. 4.17. Grasping of a single-handled polearm when the metal part of the polearm is less than 30 centimeters from the attacker's index finger. 4.18. Grasping the feet of an opponent with both hands. 4.19. Any strokes to an opponent's face if one of the opponents uses an open face helmet. It does not matter whether the second opponent uses a closed or open face helmet, the strokes are mutually exclusive. Important. If a fighter preserving the normal position of the head and neck can be punched in the face with a clenched fist without hand protection, his helmet is considered to be an open face helmet. 4.20. Any actions which are not listed in Chapter 3. Only the actions stated in these rules are allowed. 4.21. The fighters who are out of the battle, due to their falling down or the decision of a referee, but are on the lists, are strongly prohibited from standing up on both legs before the command of the Knight Marshal, stop the battle. If a fighter is out of the battle because of falling, losing equipment, or because of Marshal's decision, he is to take a comfortable sitting or lying position on the lists and wait for the end of the round without interfering in the battle. With his comfortable position, the fighter shows that he is not injured. Chapter 5, Penalties. 5.1. A rebuke is a sanction applied to a fighter for insignificant rules violations. Its aim is to draw the fighter's attention to his actions. It's not to be put in the record. 5.2. A warning is a yellow card given to a fighter for a rules violation, and it is to be stated in the record. The yellow card influences the rating of the fighter and his team. The yellow card can be given only by the Knight Marshal of the tournament. A fighter gets a yellow card in the following cases. 5.2.1. For use of any prohibited action stated in Chapter 4, Prohibited Techniques. 5.2.2. For use of any actions that are not listed in Chapter 3, Authorized Techniques. 5.2.3. For rising and standing up on both feet after falling on the lists before the command, Stop the battle. 5.2.4. For poor quality, dirty, rusty, dented, or not authentic gear. 5.2.5. For unsportsmanlike behavior, boorishness, foul language, or shouting at the referees, opponents, or spectators. 5.2.6. For starting a battle before the command, to the battle. 5.2.7. For keeping to attack after the command, stop the battle, and a yellow flag hanging before the face. 5.2.8. For ignoring the Knight Marshal's or field referee's commands. 5.2.9. For the continuation of a battle without an important element of the protective arms. Important. For all the violations mentioned above, the fighter can get 1 or 2 yellow cards for one violation, depending on the seriousness of the violation and the decision of the Knight Marshal. 5.3. If a fighter gets 2 yellow cards, he is removed from the competition. 2 yellow cards are equal to 1 red card. 5.4. Disqualification, the red card, is the sanction applied to a fighter for serious or recurrent, the second yellow card, rules violations, which should be stated in the report. After the fighter gets the red card, he is removed from further participation in the competition and is replaced by a substitute fighter of the team. A fighter can be disqualified only by the Knight Marshal of the tournament. Grounds for disqualification of a fighter. 5.4.1. Systematical rules violation when the fighter gets 2 cards within an event. 5.4.2. Injuring an opponent with a prohibited stroke or technique. 5.4.3. Rude and systematical dissent, not reasoned contestation of referees' decisions, insulting opponents or other participants of the event, or treating them with no respect. 5.5. Disqualification of a fighter affects the rating of his team. In the battle in which a fighter got the red or the second yellow card, and in the next fight of the event, the team has to conduct with not full membership, 1 fighter less in comparison to the opponents. Important. In the next battle after a fighter got the red card, his team has to conduct with not full membership, 1 fighter less in comparison to the opponents. 5.6. In a case when 2 fighters of a team are disqualified, got 2 red cards, and any fighter of the team gets a warning, a yellow card, the Knight Marshal of the tournament can disqualify the entire team. 5.7.1. The team gets more than 2 red cards within an event, plus 1 warning to a team fighter. 5.7.2. The team and its captain enter into dissent with referees and contest their decision, insults opponents or behaves disrespectfully with them, as well as other parties in the competition. 5.7. Team disqualification is a sanction applied to an entire team in the following cases. Chapter 6. Filing an Appeal. 6.1. In a case of a disagreement with the decision of the referees and the night marshal, the team captain can make a protest. The protest is to be written in an appeal form, which can be given to the team captain by event organizers. The number of these forms is brought under regulation and decided by organizers of every event. 6.2. The protest is to be well-grounded and can be made on the following occasions. 6.2.1. Removal of a fighter from the battle with violation of the rules. 6.2.2. Continuation of actions by a fighter of the opposing team after he was removed from the battle. 6.2.3. Improper removal of a fighter from the battle by a field referee. 6.2.4. A rule violation made by the fighters of the opposing team which wasn't registered by the referees. 6.2.5. Deliberate injuring. 6.2.6. Use of prohibited techniques which strongly influence the balance of forces in a battle. 6.3. The protest should be made by the team captain after the battle is over and the results are announced. The protest is to be made in a calm and well-reasonable form, personally to the night marshal, and has to be written in the special appeal form. The protest is to be considered within 30 to 45 minutes. 6.4. Possible outcomes of the protest consideration. 6.4.1. General repeated round. 6.4.2. Repeated round with different membership. 6.4.3. Imposition of a yellow or red card to the fighters. 6.4.4. Disqualification of a team. 6.4.5. Reconsideration of the round score or battle result. 6.5. If a team is not satisfied with the decision of the night marshal, made after consideration of the first appeal, its captain has the right to file a second appeal to the Supreme Appeal Commission, which consists of the organizers of the event. To re-appeal, the appeal form has to be filled in and submitted directly to the organizers of the event, supported by verbal reasoning of the intention. The re-appeal is to be considered by the Supreme Appeal Commission within 3 hours. It includes watching the video materials and interviewing the panel of referees. After that, the final decision is to be taken.